Hi friends. I know I haven't done very much commentary. My name is Ina Irby. I'm not a therapist, I'm not a life coach, I'm a mom. We have been sick. 2 weeks we've been sick. We've had that terrible flu, and so it's really hit us hard as a family. And I don't know about you, but as an ex-Jehovah's Witness and being recently disassociated, I think things that happen to you as an individual, if you've had any, let's say, financial difficulties, or you are in a physical, let's say you got sick, and it just takes you a lot longer to get over these different difficulties in life, especially because there's a measure of depression that comes along with that, because you don't have your community, and you've cut yourself off from your community, which is normal, right? You become a little bit depressed because of what you're going through, and then sickness hits a little harder, financial difficulties hit a little harder. So yeah, I would imagine that our sickness is lingering a lot longer because there's depression that's involved with that as well. I noticed that with my kids. They are depressed because they don't have their community. And that is the hardest thing, I think, as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, that when you leave the organization, you do not have your community anymore. And so, we're trying to balance all of that, and it's hard. It's not easy. A friend asked me, recently, would you consider going back? Because that's what she wanted to do. She was considering going back. She misses people. I'm 49 years old. I realize the damage that's done when you're 49 versus 8 and 13. At 8 and 13, you're a lot more resilient, and you can come back from not having a certain amount of friends of what you think are people who are so determined to worship 8 men and an organization. They're determined to follow along with the lies, and even unbeknownst to them that they're actually doing it. So I don't believe that all these people are doing this on purpose. I believe that they are slaves to their thoughts. And so what are you going to do? As an individual, I don't really hold that against them, but at the same time, I used to think elders didn't know what they were doing. And now it's hard for me to believe that they don't know what they're doing. And as Mr. Frederick Douglass said, you can't be a slave overseer and not be bad. You can't. I didn't even get to comment on all the information that came out from the Oxygen channel. My hats go off to all these beautiful people that are willing to come out. Dolores Lyles, oh goodness, Trey Bundy, who else? There was Debbie McDaniels, Sarah Brooks. All of what was said about the information that was brought out by all the ex-Jehovah's Witnesses out there was amazing. I agree with all of it. And I think the most telling for my family situation is that the adults, in all of the experiences, the adults did not go to the authorities. So people who were supposed to protect their children sided with the perpetrator. In Debbie McDaniels' case, her parents sat with and behind the perpetrator. Now, I thought about that. Now, if you were one of Jehovah's Witnesses living in McAllister and you knocked on someone's door and you find out Father was behind your door and you saw that oxygen episode of how her parents sat behind the perpetrator, if you have an ounce of justice, if you have an ounce of justice as a parent or as a human being for a child, to sit and see that the parent does not have normal human emotions for their own children or their own child. I mean, I would hate to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses and knock on somebody's door. This was wrong. This was wrong. And that is what Lloyd brings out and Mark. They bring out and individuals in the organization. If you don't have any idea that child molesting is going on, and if it hasn't affected your family, you are really truly clueless as a regular individual that has never been touched by it. And you don't see then justice unless you've been touched by it. Something that wasn't brought out was forgiveness. I remember when my mother came home and the clergy penitent privilege was given to the child molester. And so the elders didn't go to the authorities, and yet they told my parents, and especially my mother, because she had a hard time forgiving this child molester, the importance of her forgiving the child molester. And I think Chessa touched on it, that the elders expected forgiveness by the publishers or the family members that had gotten their children molested. And I remember my mom explaining that, and that it was hard for her to, when the elder had told her that, she said, I don't have to forgive that man. So forgiveness is something that is really stressed, and yet that is supposed to be given to the child molester. That forgiveness should be given to the child molester. But there is very little encouragement when it comes to the protection of the child. But the elders, the parents, I mean, you see in all those situations, pretty much the ball was dropped. And my father went out in service with Brother Hurd after the experience of child molest in our family. And Brother Hurd knows. Just like Brother Letton knew about Chessa's experience. Brother Hurd heard my dad explain the circumstances out in field service. He was a district overseer at the time here in California. And he heard my father and out about his experience. And Brother Hurd said these words: what you have to do for your family. There you go. Do what you have to do for your family. That was it. That was all. Do what you have to do for your family. So it's just blank statements, and there's no acknowledgement for the organization or for the elders to do anything about it, to go to the authorities. Do what you have to do for your family. That was it. So it's not that like these governing body members don't know that these things are happening to the families. They know, and they're not willing to do anything about it. They're not willing to protect the children. And that is probably the hardest. That as a parent, my daughter is 13 years old. It's the same age that my brother was, baptized, and probably less than a 2-year period later, he was molested. And the bottom line is, even though my parents went to the authorities, the ball was dropped, and the child was not taken to a place where he could get psychological help. And it eventually affected his whole life, and it affected our family as a whole. No, nothing was given to us psychologically to help us get through that. And even though I knew tidbits of information, I was still affected by what happened because it affected my father later. And because of that, I mean, he felt like he couldn't protect his family. So the processes of protection for individuals that have emotional needs that need to be taken care of, or physical needs that need to be taken care of, there's no help for these people. There's no help. There's nothing that is there to be a safety net for individuals that have been molested and their families. There's no safety net there. There's no protection there. It was sad to see that the organization is still not doing anything to protect the children in the organization. They leave it up to the parents, and then the parents are generally not strong enough to get out of the organization themselves and step out and be stronger. So because they've been so conditioned by the organization's thoughts and bad behavior, abusive behavior, so they're not able to take care of their children and protect them properly. I think that is probably that's what I noticed. And for decades it's been that way. It hasn't changed. It hasn't changed, and it's a tragedy. And that's what I notice. For forgiveness too. They expect forgiveness. It was very, very rarely touched upon on that series. They wanted my parents to forgive the child molester, and that put a great burden. My mom said she didn't pray for 5 years. My dad had to pray. And the bottom line is, despite the fact that my parents went to the authorities, the ball was dropped and protection was not given to the individual that needed the most protection. And so Trey Bundy said something very important. He said individuals could do something about it, that we can write to our senators. So Jehovah's Witnesses are known for their letters to politicians. And there's always a portion, I think anybody who leaves the organization feels a little hopeless. I mean, that's why I do what I'm doing, is because I feel hopeless. I'm a mom, and I put all my blood, sweat, and tears in this organization. And when you do that, when you're left with what you actually have and what you realize, you're left with a pile of lies. And so you're stuck, and it's hard to get unstuck. But there are ways that we can do it, and that is action. Action makes you feel like you're doing something about it. And I encourage you to write to your senator. Explain to them the importance of doing something to protect the children in the organization. And yes, we have laws that would a longer time to, as far as going to the authorities. Let's see, it's to report, right? To report to file lawsuits. That will allow someone who has been sexually abused to go to the authorities. So that's wonderful. But the 2-witness rule, that shouldn't even be applied. You know, we can be able to address our public figures and tell them that these abuses are happening within the organization and that children need to be protected, because adults aren't protecting them. Not even their parental adults are protecting the children. That's how it should be. A parent is supposed to protect the child. And time again, parents have not protected their children in the organization. And so those laws, there are laws that protect children from individuals that aren't doing it. And I think that is something that has to be addressed. I understand that we should be, kind to the average Jehovah's Witness, but the bottom line is children are not being protected in the organization. And it's that way, and it's been that way for decades. And it's that way now. So, yeah, I think elders do need to be held accountable. Once it hits the pocketbook of individuals and they get fined because they're not doing the right thing by going to the authorities, that's when things may start to change in the congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses. When elders get fined and put in prison. And like I said, I don't believe that a slave overseer, I don't believe that there's good elders anymore because of the fact that they know these things are happening. You cannot be an elder for more than, I would say, a couple years before you recognize the fact that there's abuses in the congregation that need to be changed. Laws within the congregation that don't apply in the congregation. You cannot make those laws apply in just a congregation. It should be a law that is even outside, from the outside world, that looks fair. Not just in just an organization. But the outside world should be able to be protected as well. And that includes children from the outside world. Once inside laws are made, doesn't generally protect the outside child. A child that is in Satan's organization doesn't protect a child like that. Laws need to be changed. So, write your letters. Do something about it. Make a stink. These are things that we can do as a mom. As a mom, you can do these things. Busy, but you can sit down and figure it out and write that letter to, and make public officials aware of the abuses in the organization so that children can be protected. And that's what I encourage. So you don't feel like we're helpless. We're not helpless. We live in America. If you're a woman of color, and if you're a woman, we live in America. Last time I heard, it's a free country. Exercise your right to freedoms that we have here in this country. Write to your local legislative individuals in your state and make changes. Let your voices be heard. Let your voices be heard. So if you're a mommy out there and your family is suffering, I'm right there with you. I got buckets, and we've been throwing up. We've had diarrhea. It's run the gamut. It's fevers. When it's one person, then after that one person, then it goes back to the first person after it's hit all the family members. So that's where I am right now. And that's why I haven't been doing commentary, because we've been exhausted. I have been exhausted. And it seems to have hit me in the chest. So it takes a lot of rest. Mm-hmm. So I hope, as families that are out there struggling, it's the pain might be initially at the beginning, but just know in the future it's a lot better for you. Wouldn't want my daughter to go through 31 years as a baptized Jehovah's Witness and be 50 years old and finally recognize that she's been lied to and that her mother didn't do the right thing. And so, yeah, it's lonely and it feels scary, and sometimes you don't seem to get up in the morning as bright and crisp as you would like. But the long run, if you look at the long run of it all and you look past today, it'll get better. I promise. Just don't give up. And one day at a time. I hope this helps you on your healing journey. Follow your bliss and be good humans.